The rain hammered the tin roof of the old warehouse like gunfire from a Tommy gun in some forgotten war film. Each drop a reminder that New Orleans never slept easy. Elias Hawthorne slammed his fist into the rusted metal door, the echo bouncing off the flooded streets of the French Quarter. But it was his own heartbeat that drowned out the storm, wild, erratic, like the night he first crossed paths with the man who would unravel him. "You think you can just walk away after what you've done?" Ronan's voice sliced through the downpour from the shadows inside, low and gravel rough, pulling Elias into the abyss before he could even catch his breath. Elias stumbled forward, water sluicing off his soaked leather jacket, the kind he'd bought on a whim in a thrift shop back in Portland, Maine, thinking it made him look tougher than he felt. At 25, he'd come to this city chasing ghosts. His own, mostly, dreams of starting over after his family's lobster boat went under in a squall, leaving him with debts that followed like barnacles. New Orleans had seemed like salvation. Jazz spilling from every corner, the air thick with magnolia and sin. But salvation had teeth, and they were sunk deep into him now. Ronan Whitaker stood there in the dim glow of a single hanging bulb, arms crossed over a broad chest that strained the buttons of his crisp white shirt, sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms corded with veins and ink, a coiled serpent tattoo that seemed to writhe in the flickering light. At 35, Ronan was the kind of man who commanded rooms without raising his voice, his dark hair slicked back, jaw shadowed with stubble that spoke of late nights and harder choices. His eyes, a piercing hazel that caught the green of the bayou at dawn, fixed on Elias with the intensity of a predator sizing up not prey, but something far more dangerous, a mirror to his own fractured soul. "You owe me, Hawthorne," Ronan said, stepping closer, the scent of his cologne, sandalwood and smoke, cutting through the metallic tang of rain. "That shipment you botched? It's not just money. It's blood on the streets if the feds sniff it out." Elias's throat tightened, the words he'd rehearsed dissolving like sugar in the storm. He'd been running small errands for Ronan's crew for months. Nothing heavy, just deliveries in the dead of night, envelopes that felt heavier than they should. It was supposed to be a way out, a quick cash flow to keep the lights on in his cramped shotgun house in the Marigny. But last week's drop had gone sideways. A tale from the DEA, a narrow escape down Bourbon Street's alleys, and now the heat was on. "I didn't sign up for this," Elias muttered, his main accent clipping the edges of his words, making him sound smaller than he was. "You said it was clean." Ronan's laugh was a low rumble devoid of humor. He closed the distance in 2 strides, his hand clamping Elias's shoulder, not hard but firm enough to ground him, to remind him of the power humming beneath that tailored calm. "Clean? In this life? Boy, you walked into my world eyes wide open. Thought that pretty face and those sad stories would get you a free pass." His thumb brushed the collar of Elias's jacket, a gesture too intimate for the rage in his voice, sending a shiver through Elias that had nothing to do with the cold. Elias jerked back, but not far enough. The air between them crackled, thick with unspoken accusations and something darker, something that had been building since their first meeting 6 months ago in a dimly lit bar off Esplanade. Ronan had bought him a drink then, Sazerac, heavy on the rye, and listened as Elias spilled his guts about lost boats and empty nets. By the end of the night, Elias was in over his head, not just with the job offer, but with the way Ronan's gaze lingered, stripping him bare in a way no storm ever could. Now in the warehouse's gloom, surrounded by crates stamped with faded Creole warnings, Elias felt that pull again. "What do you want from me, Ronan? My soul on a platter? I've got nothing left." Ronan's expression softened just a fraction, the lines around his eyes deepening like cracks in fine china. He was born in the Irish Channel, raised on tales of bootleggers and bayou kings, his family tree tangled in the roots of the city's underbelly. The Whitaker name meant protection and peril in equal measure. He'd built his empire on smuggling, not the brutal hits of old-school syndicates, but whispers and shadows, moving art, antiquities, anything that crossed borders without questions. Until this slip of a kid from up north crashed into his carefully constructed walls. "I want you to fix it," Ronan said finally, his voice dropping to a murmur that vibrated through Elias's chest. "And I want you to stay the hell out of my way until you do." But as he turned to leave, his hand lingered on Elias's arm, fingers tracing the damp fabric, And in that touch was a question neither dared voice. What if staying away was the one thing neither could do? The door clanged shut behind Ronan, leaving Elias alone with the rain's relentless tattoo. He slid down against a crate, knees to chest, the weight of it all pressing in, the job, the man, the city that wrapped around him like Spanish moss. Little did he know that night was just the prelude. Months later, when the impossible happened, when a positive test strip trembled in his hand under the harsh fluorescence of a corner pharmacy, the real storm would break. Ronan, the untouchable boss, would become the father of his child. And love? It would collide with danger like thunderheads over Lake Pontchartrain, leaving nothing unscathed. But that was still to come. For now, Elias wiped the rain from his face, steeling himself for the lies he'd have to live. He pushed off the floor, the warehouse's shadows swallowing him whole, and stepped back into the night. New Orleans didn't forgive debts, and neither, it seemed, did the heart. The weeks blurred into a haze of evasion and edgework. Elias dodged calls from low-level enforcers, guys like Tommy Knuckles Riley, a barrel-chested Irish transplant with a laugh like grinding gears and a penchant for brass knuckles he never quite used. Tommy was Ronan's right hand, loyal to a fault, but his eyes always lingered on Elias a beat too long, appraising, like he knew the kid was more liability than asset. "Boss says lay low, Hawthorne," Tommy grunted one afternoon, cornering him outside a po' joint on Decatur Street. The air hummed with the sizzle of frying shrimp and the distant wail of a saxophone. "And if you screw up again, it's not just your ass on the line." Elias nodded, forcing a grin that didn't reach his eyes, his mind replaying the warehouse scene like a looped reel. Ronan hadn't called since, hadn't shown his face, but the absence gnawed at him worse than any threat. Nights found him pacing his narrow rental, the walls papered in faded fleur-de-lis, staring at the ceiling fan's lazy spin. He'd come south seeking reinvention, but all he'd found was a man who saw through his bluster to the scared boy beneath, the one who'd watched his father drown in those Maine waters, too young to save him, too old now to forget. One evening, as the sun bled orange over the Mississippi, Elias found himself at the Absinthe House, a relic of a bar where ghosts of pirates and presidents mingled in the ether. He nursed a glass of the Green Fairy, the anise bite sharpening his senses, when Ronan slid onto the stool beside him. No preamble, no apology, just that hazel stare softened by the low light. "Missed you," Ronan said simply, signaling the bartender for two more. It wasn't poetry, but from a man like him it was a sonnet. Elias's pulse stuttered. "Yeah?" Felt more like exile. Ronan leaned in, elbow brushing Elias's, the contact electric. "Had to keep you safe. From them. From me." His voice cracked on the last word, a fissure in the armor. In the bar's murmur, clink of glasses, murmur of lovers' quarrels, Ronan confessed fragments. A rival crew from Baton Rouge sniffing too close, whispers of betrayal in his own ranks. "This life. It chews up the good ones, Eli. And you're the best thing that's wandered into my mess." The nickname Eli slipped out like a secret, warm and worn. Elias felt it settle in his chest, displacing the chill. They talked then, really talked, the absinthe loosening tongues and truths. Ronan spoke of his mother, a fierce redhead who'd scrubbed floors in the Garden District to keep him in school, only to die young from the bottle's curse. Elias shared the boat's last voyage, the way the sea had claimed his dad without mercy, leaving him adrift. By closing time, as the streets emptied under a canopy of live oaks, Ronan's hand found Elias's under the table, fingers interlacing with a quiet fierceness. They stumbled back to Ronan's penthouse overlooking the river, a sleek area of glass and steel amid the quarter's antiquity. No words as clothes hit the floor, just the urgency of bodies seeking solace in the storm. Ronan's touch was reverent, mapping Elias's skin like uncharted bayou. Callous palms over ribs, lips tracing the hollow of his throat. Elias arched into it, gasping Ronan's name like a prayer, the world narrowing to the heat between them, the rhythm of breath sinking like jazz horns. Afterward, tangled in sheets that smelled of salt and citrus, Ronan traced lazy circles on Elias's back. "This can't be," he murmured, but his arms tightened, contradicting every syllable. Elias pressed a kiss to his collarbone. "Then let's make it a lie worth living." Dawn crept in with the cry of gulls, and for a stolen morning, they pretended the world outside didn't exist. Coffee brewed strong on the balcony, beignet dusted with powdered sugar from Café du Monde. Ronan laughed, a real laugh, head thrown back. As Elias recounted a botched fishing tale from his youth, hook caught in his own sleeve. It was fragile, this bubble, but in it Elias glimpsed possibility. A life where debts were paid not in blood but in time. Yet shadows lengthened by noon. Tommy's call came like a siren. Rivals hit one of our safe houses. Boss needs you gone, kid. Now. Elias dressed in silence, Ronan's gaze heavy on him. At the door Ronan pulled him close, foreheads touching. Come back to me. Promise. I will, Elias whispered, the words a vow sealed in the humid air. He vanished into the city, holing up in a Fleabag motel in mid-city, the kind with neon signs flickering vacancy like a warning. Days turned to weeks of cat and mouse. Coded texts from Ronan, burner phones swapped like secrets, near misses with unmarked cars prowling the levees. Elias ran messages when he could, drops in neutral spots like Jackson Square, where tourists masked the tension, but each brush with danger etched deeper lines on his face. One night, feverish and alone, nausea hit like a rogue wave. He chalked it up to stress, the cheap takeout from Mother's restaurant curdling in his gut. But when the tests confirmed it, 3 strips, all positive, staring up from the sink like accusations, panic crested. Male pregnancy wasn't myth in their circles. Whispers of experimental clinics in the quarter, black market serums for those desperate enough to defy biology. Ronan had mentioned it once offhand, a favor owed to a doctor friend. Had it happened then in the heat of their first night? Or was it the serum Elias had taken on a whim, chasing wholeness in a body that felt half-formed? He didn't call Ronan. Not yet. The fear was too vast. Rejection. Entanglement in a world of guns and grudges. Instead, he fled north, back to Maine's rocky embrace, to the salt-crusted cottage his aunt left him in Bar Harbor. The drive was a blur. Interstates unspooling under tires that hummed like unanswered questions. Acadia National Park loomed on the horizon, its pines a stark contrast to the quarter's lush decay. In the cottage, waves crashed eternal against granite, a lullaby for the unborn. Elias's hand rested on the subtle swell, whispering apologies to the life inside. We'll be okay, he lied to the empty room, the fire crackling in the hearth. Letters from New Orleans piled up. Tommy's scrawls cryptic and urgent. Then Ronan's, penned in a hand steady as his gaze. Wherever you are, come home. I need you both. Both. The word undid him. Tears came hot and unbidden, soaking the wool blanket. He'd run to protect this fragile spark, but in doing so, severed the thread to the man who'd ignited it. Love, he'd learned, wasn't a shelter. It was the storm itself. Winter gripped the coast, snow blanketing the cliffs like forgotten sins. Elias's body changed, mornings of dry heaves into the porcelain sink, afternoons walking the shore, wind whipping his coat as he named the child in his mind. Finn after a fisherman uncle, strong and unyielding. Dreams haunted him. Ronan's face in the surf reaching always just out of grasp. A knock shattered the isolation one February gale. Elias opened the door to Tommy, snow-dusted and grim, a pistol bulge under his parka. Boss sent me. Said if I didn't drag you back, he'd come himself, and God help us all. Elias's hand flew to his abdomen, protective. It's not that simple. Tommy's eyes widened, flicking down then away, a flush creeping up his neck. Jesus, kid. You're. The flight south was tense, Tommy white-knuckled on the wheel of a black SUV. Radio crackling with static and half-heard threats. Rivals are closing in, he muttered over the engine's roar. Some rat in the crew sold us out. Boss thinks it's close, real close. Elias stared out at the blurring pines, heart pounding. Ronan knew. Of course he did. The thought terrified and thrilled in equal measure. By the time they hit the Louisiana line, the bayou's humidity seeped back in, wrapping around him like an old lover's arms. Ronan's compound, a sprawling estate on the outskirts of the city, hidden behind wrought iron gates and live oaks draped in resurrection fern, loomed like a fortress. Guards nodded Tommy through, their rifles glinting in the dusk. Inside, the air was cool marble and polished wood. a world away from the warehouse grit. Ronan waited in the library, a fire roaring in the great bookshelves groaning under leather-bound volumes of Faulkner and Hemingway, tomes he'd never cracked, Elias suspected, but kept for the weight of legacy. He rose as Elias entered, his frame filling the doorway, face a mask of controlled fury and something softer aching. "You left without a word," Ronan said, voice like crushed velvet. Elias swallowed, the swell of his belly impossible to hide under the loose sweater. "I was scared. For him. For us." Ron's gaze dropped, and for the first time, Elias saw the man falter, shoulders sagging, hand reaching out tentative, as if the child were a mirage. "Him." The word broke raw. "Finn," Elias supplied, stepping closer. Ronan's palm hovered, then settled gentle on the curve, feeling the flutter beneath. His breath hitched, eyes glistening in the firelight. "Mine," Ronan whispered, not possession but wonder. He pulled Elias into an embrace, careful, reverent, lips brushing his temple. "Ours." That night they lay entwined in the master suite, balcony doors open to the chorus of crickets and distant jazz. Ronan's hand cradled the bump, fingers splaying protective. "I never thought," he trailed off, voice thick. "This life doesn't make fathers. It makes ghosts." Elias turned, nose to Ronan's neck, inhaling the familiar sandalwood. "Then we'll haunt them together." Spring unfurled in the garden, azaleas blooming riotous pink against the estate's stone walls. Elias's days filled with quiet domesticity, prenatal visits to the discreet doctor in the quarter, walks under the arbors where Ronan pointed out hidden alcoves for stashing treasures. Their love deepened in stolen moments, lazy mornings in bed, Ronan's head pillowed on Elias's chest, listening to Finn's kicks like Morse code. "Strong like his old man," Ronan would murmur, pride lacing the words. But danger simmered beneath the idol. Whispers from the crew. Shipments intercepted, cars tailing Tommy's runs. Ronan grew distant, nights spent in the study poring over maps and ledgers, his serpent tattoo seeming to coil tighter. "It's nothing," he'd say when Elias pressed, but the shadows under his eyes told another tale. One humid evening as fireflies danced over the pond, betrayal struck. Elias, restless, wandered the halls and overheard voices in the den, Tommy's laced with venom. "You think I don't see how he's softening you? That kid's a weakness, Ronan. The boys are restless. One word from me to the Baton Rouge crew, and it's over." Ronan's reply was ice. "Touch him and you're done. Family first, Knuckles. Always." Elias slipped away, heart hammering, nausea rising not from the baby but from the rot at the core. Tommy, loyal Tommy, the snake in their garden. He didn't tell Ronan, not yet. Doubt festered, poisoning the trust. Was it paranoia or the city's curse turning every ally suspect? Finn arrived on a sweltering July dawn, the estate's birthing suite a sanctuary of white linens and beeping monitors. Labor gripped Elias like a vice, sweat slick and screaming, Ronan's hand vice-tight in his. "Breathe, Eli. I've got you." The doctor's serum had worked miracles, but pain was universal. Then a cry, fierce, indignant, filled the room. Ronan cut the cord with trembling hands, tears carving tracks down his stubbled cheeks as he lifted the boy, swaddled in blue. "Finn Whitaker Hawthorne," he declared, voice breaking, placing him in Elias's arms. The child had Ronan's hazel eyes, Elias's dusting of freckles, a perfect collision of worlds. For weeks the nursery became their universe. Rockers creaking on the veranda, Finn's gurgles mingling with the rustle of palmettos. Ronan shed his jacket for a father's apron, bottle feeding at 3 a.m., humming old Irish lullabies his mother sang. Love bloomed fierce, a counterpoint to the encroaching dark. Elias watched Ronan with their son, the mobster's edges sanded smooth, and dared believe in redemption. But betrayal doesn't wait for bliss. It came on a crisp October night, leaves turning gold in the garden. Tommy cornered Elias in the kitchen, Finn asleep upstairs, a knife glinting under the pendant light. "You poisoned him against me," Tommy snarled, breath sour with whiskey. "Boss was iron before you. Now, he's blind." Elias backed against the counter, hands raised. "This isn't about me. It's about power.
Let it go, Tommy.
The blade pressed to his throat, a thin line of warmth trickling. Power's all there is. A shot rang out clean precise from the doorway. Tommy crumpled, Ronan standing there, pistol smoking, face carved from granite. Get Finn, he ordered, voice steady but eyes wild with aftermath. Sirens wailed distant as they fled to the safe house in the bayou, a clapboard cabin shrouded in cypress knees. Ronan held Elias through the shakes, Finn bundled between them. He was family, Ronan whispered into the dark. My mistake. Elias cupped his face, thumbs brushing tears. Family's what we make it. Not blood. Choice. The feds closed in days later, tipped by Tommy's dying confession recorded damning. Ronan's empire crumbled in raids and indictments, assets seized, allies scattering like roaches. They ran north, Elias driving through the night, Ronan in the passenger seat cradling Finn, the rearview mirror a portal to the life left behind. In Maine the cottage welcomed them, waves crashing eternal, pines whispering forgiveness. Ronan, stripped of power, found work in a boatyard, hands calloused anew from honest labor. Elias wrote stories of storms and salvations, submitting to small presses in Boston. Finn toddled on the shore, collecting shells, his laughter a bomb. One evening, as aurora faint veiled the sky, Ronan knelt by the fire, Finn asleep in his lap. I was your boss once, he said softly, hazel eyes on Elias. Then father to your son. Now, just a man who loves you. Elias knelt beside him, fingers threading through dark hair. That's enough. More than enough. In the hearth's glow they kissed slow, certain. The world's dangers faded to echoes. Love had collided with peril, yes, but in the wreckage they'd forged something unbreakable. A family free in the salt wind, identities reclaimed not in shadows but in light. Compassion's quiet victory. A testament to choosing heart over empire, self over syndicate. The sea rolled on indifferent, but for them it sang of second chances.